Violetta is saying, I work on a project where a web app is already developed. I would like to make API tests. Could you please describe in general, and Violetta understands that a lot of it depends. So could you please describe in general steps you do in this case?
Okay, so
how do you approach this problem?
Right, so starting from an app that's already built, I go to the documentation for APIs. So if that's an open API document, or you have some other kind of documentation for the APIs, if there is none, that's a whole other thing. But start from there to kind of familiarize myself with what the API is doing. Whether that's there or not, I will go to the web app and run it with DevTools open, look at the network calls to see what API calls are being made and what ones are being used the most. So like most of the functions that I'm doing with, creating this new item or signing in or whatever, what calls are being made, and finding those critical areas in the app and then making sure that those are higher priority in my API testing. So if you're approaching it that way, that's pretty much where I start with, is how the app is used, and kind of figure out the API calls that are used for that, and then put it in some kind of priority from there. Like, so how I would approach testing it from the UI side, and just say, okay, well then I need the API calls for those UI components, and test it that way.
Yeah, you just reminded me. I've been in a similar situation where there were no. I was on a project where there was a performance problem, and that was actually one of the steps that we took. So I did exactly what you described. Like I ran the web, it's ran the web app in the browser as you usually would. Got the DevTools open, and then, well, I might have been using Charles Proxy actually, and I just filtered through all the API calls and was like, okay, team, this is what the app actually does. And then from there, we were able to get a sense of, we were able to start digging to find out where.
Yeah, either DevTools, Charles Proxy, Fiddler, any of those that are gonna, like Wireshark, anything that's gonna get the calls that the app is making.
And I get and that kind of implies that it helps if you know what the key user journeys are, or the key uses are of your application.
Yeah, I mean, so that's where you kind of start to understand that API testing and every other kind of testing is the same. Like we're not just like, oh, I want to know what the computer is going to say to the other computer. Like it's still like what user flows and things like that are important, and what API calls are being made for those, and then testing those scenarios.
Okay, cool. Okay, I hope that answered your question, Violetta. Thank you very much for that.